Hello, everybody, and thank you for the invitation. Today, I would like to talk to you about coal as a national resource. And when I say coal as a national resource, I'm saying coal as a national resource for us in South Africa. And often we talk only about us in South Africa, but truth be told, the whole SADC region, I'm talking about 15 countries, and I'm talking about sub-Saharan Africa and the entire continent, effectively will have to start working together to ensure that there's good electricity or energy supply for every country. Today, I'd like to talk to you about coal being a national resource. And if you look at us as South Africans, it is critical to our economic growth. We continue to talk about a country that's going to push hard to take its economic growth beyond 2, 3, 4, or 5%. Once we reach 6% one day, I know it sounds ambitious, but reality is that energy is the key driver of economic growth. We know that we're competing in the coal space with nuclear. We know that nuclear is cleaner than coal in terms of carbon emissions. We know that the competition is getting stronger and stronger from renewables, that is wind, solar, and others. But we know for a fact that South Africa as a country has got 15 coal-fired power stations that generate electricity, which is almost more than 90% of the electricity generated for this country comes from coal. And there are quite a number of countries that depend on us as South Africa, especially in the SADC region, in terms of coal, in terms of energy. We export electricity to those countries. Therefore, we will still mine coal for a period of time to come. But does it make us environmental denialists? Does it make us against what is happening with carbon emission or what fossil fuels do to the environment or to the entire globe? No, we are not against. We understand the challenges that the world faces in terms of in terms of clean air, in terms of green energy, in terms of ensuring that the next generations benefit out of clean energy. So why do we continue to mine coal? South Africa hosts almost 1% of global coal reserves. We are 71% of national power comes from coal, which is more than 90% of Eskom's power generation being coal-based. With the fifth largest currency earner in South Africa at around $6.7 billion in 2019. And again, more than 70% of SA's electricity demand is generated from coal. Therefore, coal remains a national resource and it remains SA's power generation in the medium term. We know that it is important when we talk about coal then to talk about an interesting subject. A transition from coal to other forms of energy which are clean. But as I speak to you, ladies and gentlemen, the most important part for us is, as coal miners, we cannot say, let's shut all the coal-fired power stations today and move on either to hydro, wind, nuclear, or solar. We are saying that transition should be managed responsibly. And when we talk of responsible transition, therefore, we look at the IRP, the Integrated Resources Plan that has been presented by the Department of Mineral and Energy in South Africa. We know that the IRP aims to increase the share of renewable energy capacity to approximately 40% by 2030, probably earlier, and to ensure the closure of existing power station, coal-fired power stations, according to their stated decommissioning schedules. But that does not mean that today or tomorrow we must shut all the coal-fired power stations. That is why an important subject of transitioning responsibly to these other forms of energy, coal itself must look at high efficiency, low emission type of technologies, carbon capture, utilization and storage. We know that World Coal Association and quite a number of bodies are saying, are we doing enough in investigating and investing in these technologies that will make coal cleaner? I know there are quite a number of us who are saying, maybe coal is not clean, maybe coal cannot be clean. But reality of the matter as we speak, countries like ours, South Africa, we face a challenge of load shedding. It means we don't have enough energy to supply the domestic needs of our country, to supply the commercial needs of our country, to supply the industrial needs of our country, and to ensure that we are sustainable and we are reliable in terms of energy. Now, coal in South Africa is still used domestically. I've spoken to you at length about what Eskom is doing, about Eskom having 15 coal-fired power stations. In fact, 2 of those coal-fired power stations, which are 4,800 megawatt power stations in Kusile, are still in construction phase to be completed. In other words, to be completed, to be fully fledged coal-fired power station. Is that the waste that we're talking about, that we will shut all those coal-fired power stations, including those 2, and then how do we replace? We know that countries like the US are continuing to reduce their dependence on coal-fired power energy. They are introducing solar, they are introducing hydro, they are introducing wind, but gas is playing a prominent role, which is a luxury we as the sub-Saharan countries or SADC countries don't have at this point in time. We may have, yes, we do, but we have not explored to the extent that it can start flowing to generate energy. We know that Sasol is generating with petrochemicals, coal to liquids. Sasol is big in South Africa. ArcelorMittal, and we still find a lot of domestic use of coal. Power generation, petrochemical industry, metallurgical coal, and domestic heating still shows that we depend on coal. Now, is South Africa depends on coal not only domestically. We are still depending on coal in terms of our exports. We know that the 680 kilometer rail line from Mpumalanga to Richards Bay is very important to the economy. It's a job creator, it's a job provider. It's big in the life of Transnet, that rail line. It provides for export earnings when the coal prices are at a level where people are companies are profitable. We depend on that line. And we know that South Africa is the 5th largest coal exporter. There have been changes, I agree. If you look at 10 or 15 years ago, South Africa used to supply most of their coal to the EU markets. Europe was big. We know that there's been change. That pattern has changed completely. We are now predominantly supplying our coal to the Far East, India specifically, China, Pakistan, South Korea, Vietnam, Sri Lanka. In fact, for the past few years, we've not been supplying China. Whilst they are dependent on their old coal-fired power stations, they are continuing to still use coal. And therefore, whilst we depend on coal domestically, we will still continue to export coal to the Eastern market, to the Far Eastern markets, and to the rest of the world, but not in large numbers, probably less than 10% of that. Now, who are the major coal power generators? We know that China is big. We know that USA is big. We know that India is big, but they still import coal from South Africa. They still buy coal from us. We know that countries like Indonesia, Australia, USA, they are the countries who are playing a major coal power generators. And we know that the markets today, we're seeing new entrants. The new entrants are the countries where they are building coal-fired power stations and they've started to accelerate in buying more coal. Vietnam, Turkey, Bangladesh, Egypt, the Philippines. We are seeing quite a number of countries who are becoming what we call new entrants. And we know that this is a fossil fuel, this is not clean, but the edge from my side is that we need to start accelerating as well in terms of carbon capture, utilization, and storage, in terms of high efficiency, low emission types of technologies to help our coal-fired power stations improve and start reducing in terms of their carbon emissions. Now, whilst I'm talking about coal being a dependable resource for us in Africa, specifically Sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa, specifically the SADC countries, are we going to find ourselves, and I repeat this question all the time, that let's shut down today the coal-fired power stations. Let's stop mining coal and let's see what happens. We cannot do that to our population. We cannot do that to society. Let's work together in one, being responsible in a transition process. We have an abundance of coal as a country, as South Africa, and our neighbors will depend on us, and it can help us benefiting our socio-economic development. It is imperative that the trajectory of shifting from coal to greenhouse emission is responsibly handled by all of us. It remains core to the way we generate electricity. It remains core to our energy requirements as a continent. It remains core to being a job creator, job provider, socio-economic development, and a lot of communities still depend on coal. But my story is that we cannot be irresponsible and say we will shut the coal-fired power stations today. We will let wind, solar, and hydro take over until we have established their reliability, until we have established that we have enough of that. The transition will happen and continue to happen, but it has to happen responsibly. It will, for South Africa to transition or to move away from coal, we will have to make sure that our transition requires the participation of all stakeholders, government, business, the regulatory environment, society itself, to make sure that we don't fail society, to make sure that we don't fail our population in terms of them generating electricity, getting electricity or energy, to grow our businesses, to enrich ourselves in terms of socio-economic development. But that will be guided by our responsiveness to understanding that we want to save the planet. We know that coal is a carbon emitter, and we will try and use the technologies. I'm talking about carbon capture, utilization, and storage. I know it's a bit difficult. I'm talking about high energy, high efficiency, low energy, low emission type of technologies. If we can use that, if we can invest our time responsibly in ensuring that that transition is handled responsibly between renewable energy, fossil fuels, and society to save the planet, that will give us a great future. I therefore close with a remark that says, we as coal mining people, we're not irresponsible in saying, no, we believe coal is clean. We are saying there's work to be done to make it cleaner. But there's work to be done as well in terms of the transition. And in that transition, we have to be responsible so that we don't fail humanity. Thank you.